On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1970. We're going to be taking a look at Jimi Hendrix, and he's going to be performing Johnny Be Goode. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So, I am hoping that this one's going to be okay on copyrights. You know how things are with Jimi Hendrix, but because this is a cover of Johnny Be Goode, I'm hoping it's going to be alright. So, we're going to be jumping into it. I will be jumping in about halfway through the performance to point out a few things. So, if you want to watch this the whole way through without me interrupting it, then there's going to be a link in the description below. You guys can click on that. But let's get Jimmy up on screen and see how he gets on. I'm just going to jump in here because the point at which I do jump in, we've just had a note that Jimmy hits, and I've seen a lot of people refer to this particular bend and the fact that only Jimmy could get it to sound like that. The reason it sounds so unique and so different is, first of all, just because of the way that Jimmy played. Looking at his left hand technique here with his rhythm hand, we get a great close-up of it, and you can see how wild he is with it. But it is so controlled at the same time. It looks like he's just throwing caution to the wind, but he's so accurate with it. And it's that perfect blend of chaos and organization and expression and technical ability. It's all rolled into one, and that's why he got these sounds when he played. The major part of the sound with this particular note and the bend that he hits is because he gets feedback. And Jimi Hendrix was a player who danced on the edge of feedback like nobody else, and he could seemingly control it so that when he wanted the feedback to happen, it just came in, and that was a great example of it. If you do get a chance, check out the other video that I've done on Jimi Hendrix when he's playing the American National Anthem, because it's another great example of him dancing on that edge of feedback. And he always had that amp turned up so loud to, first of all, deafen the front row of the audience and probably a few more rows back, but it meant that if he held on a note and he got his guitar in the right position and he knew exactly where to hold that guitar in order to get the feedback and to make it start, it meant that he could get these sounds by hitting a bend and then allowing it just to feed back through the amp. And just to explain, if you're not a musician and you haven't played on stage and you don't know what feedback is, pretty much the louder you turn up your PA or your guitar, the more likely it is to feed back, because you start to get the sound of the amp being replicated through a mic, for example, and then it starts a feedback loop, and of course the louder the PA or the amp is turned up, the more signal there is, so the higher the chance of getting a feedback loop started. And you would have seen people trying to set up their PAs and turning the speakers, the monitor speakers, out to the side so that it doesn't hit the microphone, so that loop doesn't start up. And it's exactly the same thing with the guitar, because you have pickups on the guitar which are effectively mini microphones. When you get the angle right, and a lot of people will want to avoid feedback, but Jimi was just dancing on that edge of feedback all the time, so it meant that when he got to a particular part of the stage and tilted his guitar a particular way, he could get that feedback loop to start. And it's just something that you attribute with that Hendrix sound, just sounding wild and seemingly out of control, but he was all over it the whole time. What I love about this performance as well is the fact that it is a Jimi Hendrix version of Johnny Be Goode. He's not copying the original. He definitely hasn't got the clean tone going on. We've got a fair amount of distortion here, but he's also playing his own lines, and he's throwing in a lot of minor pentatonic and blues, and he's edging towards the minors more than the majors, but then he does throw those in as well. So you get a great mix, but it's got so much attitude in there because of the aggressiveness of the playing in general, but also the way that he just leans towards that minor key. Just before we get into the guitar, to mention about the feedback, obviously I'm not going to be having my amp as loud as to get any feedback, so you won't be getting that sound from me. But if you don't know what it sounds like, it's when a band have got all of their equipment up too loud and it's a piercing, sometimes whistling sound. It's really offensive, and it's just a noise that continues, and everyone's racing around to try and turn it down because it is so loud. But that is what Jimi's using in order to get the sound that he gets. So it gives you a bit more of an appreciation that most people, when feedback happens, they're racing around to try and turn it off. Whereas Jimi is introducing feedback for artistic effect. So just having it under that amount of control is a unique aspect to somebody's playing in the first place, but then the way that he would introduce it with this wild form of playing as well is another totally unique thing to Jimi in terms of getting that sound. So when we start this, and we've got this, and by the way, I have got a little bit of distortion on my sound, and getting into the guitar is quite wild. If you're wanting to play this along, the other thing to mention is that I've tuned my guitar to Jimi's guitar, because he's out of tune here. I think he's a little bit flat from memory, but I just started playing along and have tuned it that way. So if you are playing along in standard tuning, you'll find it's not quite right when you go to B. It's going to be flat of B, but it's not as far as B flat. It might be pretty close, but you probably don't want to be playing it there, because then when you look at what Jimi's doing, it won't correlate to your fretboard. So straight off the bat, as soon as we get into the intro, we've got these aggressive downstrokes going on, and we've got this that kind of thing. And I think actually he throws in a little bit of major up at the top there. But that whole approach of being wild with it and not playing going and being really soft with it, he's really aggressive. And also the way that he just throws the riff together in his own way, and he'll be doing that throughout this whole performance, just chopping and changing between particular lines. He's pretty much always got that sound going on, and the he's kind of approaching it like that. And when we get into the rhythm, the important thing to mention about his technique there, even though Jimi had massive hands, he's still transitioning to the thumb behind the neck in order to get the stretch with that little finger. And you can hear already that my guitar's going a little bit out of tune. This is sometimes what happens when you tune your guitar and make it flat, because it now wants to get back up to the tension it used to be at with the strings. But also when you play aggressively and the way that Jimmy used to play or attempt to get anywhere close, you'll find your strings are going to go out of tune a lot more regularly. I have given the A string a quick tweak to make it sound a little bit more in tune, but if it does drift out again, we'll just busk our way through it. But getting back into the playing, we've got this. Again, really aggressive playing style, but it's the aggression being paired with control. And the reason I say that is because when you play through this riff, you can see that my downstrokes are quite wild, but you can still hear what I'm playing clearly. It's not like going... If I was being wild with it and not muting the strings that I don't want to hear, then that would be the sound. You'd hear loads of open strings and it would be an absolute mess. So the key here is resting your first finger on the G string while keeping it quiet. So we've got this, which is now giving you freedom to hit across 3 strings while muting them. Obviously, if you don't play the guitar, you might not appreciate what's going on here, but it's going to allow you to be aggressive, but still keep a consistent and clean sound to what you're playing. And there, I'm now playing that G string with jumping into that part of the riff. Like that. And when you play it quickly, all of that will fly under your radar if you don't play guitar, even if you do play the guitar and you don't realize the amount that is going on here. But allowing that aggressive playing with the right hand is really important to get the emphasis, the emotion, the expression in the playing, but just as important is being mindful of your technique and appreciating that you've still got to apply technique. The reason that I mention having that thumb behind the neck of the guitar is that a lot of people will know Jimmy for playing over the top with his thumb and supplying his root note that way. Whereas here, because he's going to that stretch, and that's why you place your thumb behind the guitar neck in order to allow your hand to stretch more easily. As soon as you bring the thumb over the top, it's now, you can see where my little finger is when it's compared with how far I can stretch having the thumb behind the neck of the guitar. And that's why you'll see classical players as well, because the guitar neck is thicker on a classical guitar, it means it's a lot more difficult to get your thumb over the top, so they will always play with that thumb behind the neck. And I think it's also seen as bad form to have the thumb over the top in any kind of classical setting. But with Jimmy here, he is going to that position to allow himself to stretch, so it means that he's now got to make the transition from his lead shape, which is the thumb over the top, to his rhythm shape, which is his thumb behind. And this is why sometimes you'll see, especially in the verses, going, having this stretch, and then, and he's got to make that change, as I did there, in a split second in order to get from his lead back into his rhythm. So in practice, what we have is this. And so on and so forth. But you could see there how difficult it is to make the transition from your lead and then just jump over there in that split second. It takes a lot of practice in order to get that, because then you've got to... And let's also throw into the equation that Jimmy's singing at the same time while he's doing these transitions. So there is so much going on from a technical perspective on the guitar, changing shapes, but also you might have seen there on my right hand, and it will be Jimmy's left hand, the way that we've got this. They're really wild strokes that he's throwing in there. And you can sometimes hear the other strings ringing out, but that doesn't matter because it's all about the expression. Another huge thing to mention is the fact that with Jimi Hendrix it was a 3-piece setup and he's the only guitar. So to have a guitarist that is known for playing lead guitar but can still play rhythm at the same time, that's a whole different skill set. You've got rhythm guitar, you've got lead guitar, and then you've got blending rhythm and lead guitar together, which is what Jimi Hendrix did so well. There are so many guitarists that are great lead guitarists, but they have a rhythm guitarist in the background just backing them up. But let's get back into the performance and then we'll jump into more of it at the end. And there we have it, right up until the end, and we get that little squeal of feedback coming in and the whammy bar. That is such a great performance because I think that everybody knows, and especially musicians know, that this is off the cuff, or at least as off the cuff as you're gonna get, because of the way that Jimmy's playing and the wild technique. All of the lines that he's throwing together are just spur of the moment and where he wants to go at that time. And I think for me, he was one of the players who did that pretty much all the time. He would just take it wherever he wanted to take it live, and it would always be somewhere really interesting because of his background of jazz and being so well versed in so many different styles of playing. He could just throw together lines that you're totally not expecting. Another thing that I want to show you guys is the way that Jimmy, about halfway through the song, when we resume the video, when he gets into his next piece of lead, he has a little change into the open wah-wah sound. So when he's playing through this, and he then engages that wah-wah pedal and it's stuck in its open position. So if I go, you can hear that wah, and it's at the end of the wah, that's where he's got his wah-wah pedal stuck. So it means that it's really highlighting and exaggerating the top end of his sound, those higher frequencies, which means that when he does play that bend, it really cuts through and sounds totally different and gives that note something that hasn't happened before. Just listening to it, it hits you, it shocks you because it is different. So every single piece of his lead that he's playing, there's a reason for it. He's not just throwing in notes randomly and for the sake of it. He's making a point. He's doing everything totally intentionally. And when he comes down to, you know, he's occasionally getting feedback, and I just got a little harmonic in there as well, pinched harmonic with that right hand. These things tend to just filter in to your playing when you start letting go and you start playing with a bit more expression. All of this right hand and left hand of and going a bit wild with the vibrato. It's just a really fun way of playing, or at least I really enjoy playing with a little bit more caution thrown to the wind. Of course, there are other players that enjoy playing very technical pieces and get every note spot on, but I sometimes just like to play, but also listen to other players throwing caution to the wind and extemporizing and just putting across the way they're feeling through the guitar. And then at the end, we've got that really cool piece of lead where the whole band drop out, and now it's just Jimmy's guitar, and he hits that bend. And then we've got the end feedback as well, which just adds so much to it. And that wasn't exactly what he was playing, but it's along those kind of lines, and the vibe of the performance, you can start to tap into the way to play, or the way to try and express yourself the same way, or at least put across the message that you want to through your guitar. But what a fantastic version of Johnny Be Goode, a standalone version of it as well. Just combining the lead, the rhythm, keeping your attention the whole time. It's something that you don't even question when you're listening to it, because it is so engaging, and his playing is so interesting all the time from a player's perspective, but also just from a musical perspective of the notes that he chooses and how he plays them, using that feedback as well. Just having total control of that element is something else entirely. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!